At each of our symposia, we have intentionally started the morning with a story from a local individual living with, surviving of prostate cancer. And we do this to ground ourselves in the reason that we're here today, and that is to provide support and hope. And this year, it's a pleasure to have met and to welcome and invite Dr. Hamilton Greenwood to come to the podium to share his insights and experience with you. Hamilton is a 5-year survivor of prostate cancer and found renewed gratitude and purpose in his family life, his passion for teaching, and his profound reverence for the natural world that sustains us. Hamilton has been recognized for his exceptional contributions to 4 decades of post-secondary education across Saskatchewan. He instructs at Saskatchewan Polytechnic, the U of S, the U of R, and with the First Nations Métis Teacher Education Program in Prince Albert and La Ronge. And so would you, along with me, welcome Hamilton Greenwood.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for asking me to come by today. I'm full of gratitude and full of thanks for having gone through the system. What I'll be talking to you about today is a little bit about my own journey and some of my perceptions. So I'm an ecologist, I'm a wildlife biologist, and someone challenged me when I was first invited, can you weave the word ecology and urology into one sentence? And I said, well, I'm going to do my very best as we walk through this. So I'm grateful that particularly to all of us in this room, because we all play a part in working with this disease and finding ways to move ourselves through it. So how do I advance this? The green button. There we go. Who am I? I'm a husband. Many of us in this room have got significant others, and I took my vows, and my wife did too. We said we're going to take care of each other in sickness and health. And 42 years of living together, and certainly in the last few years as I went through this bout with prostate cancer, she was there with me every step of the way, and for that I'm very grateful. I got 2 kids, both of whom are peripherally involved in the, peripherally or directly involved in the medical system. You mentioned earlier Jesse Greenwood. He's my son. He's involved as a fundraiser with the St. Paul's Foundation, and I'm terribly proud of the contributions he makes to make an event like this possible and keep us all educated. I have a daughter who's a GP, and she's married to an emergency medicine physician, and I come from a line of family doctors going back multiple generations. I'm the only doctor who, as I've heard many times joking, I'm not a real doctor. I'm a doctor of ornithology or birds. So I'm a grandfather of a couple of wonderful little kids, and I know for sure, with pretty good odds, that if it hadn't been for the intervention of this group, I would not be here today. And I'm taking him home with me to Prince Albert tonight to spend the next couple of days playing. You can't get anything more grateful than that. Post-secondary teacher, 40 years of working with the universities and the colleges. It's taught me the importance of speaking with people and motivating people to get them going, to get them feeling a sense of community, which is where I'm going to come around to in a few minutes' time. And the last thing on here is I'm a bit of a storyteller. You're never really sure whether I'm giving you straight goods. But I love to weave some of my photography into the talks that I give, and I'll probably do a little bit of it there. So my cancer journey is probably not terribly different than those of you in this room who are affected by the same thing. In November of 2019, I went for one of my every 2-year physical checkups, and I sat there and I had an argument with my family physician, Dr. Paresh Narotham, probably the best family physician I've had in my 70 years of life. And he wanted to do one of those dreaded rectal exams, and oh my God, not again. I did my very best to talk my way out of that, but he won the argument, as he always does. And he said, you know, Ham, there's a slight enlargement here. I think I'm going to send you away for a PSA test, and actually, I'm going to get you an appointment with a urologist right away, too. And before that end of the week, I'd had the PSA tests. I had my first meeting with the urologist, and they both said, it looks pretty certain that you've got prostate cancer. Let's get this ball rolling. And that was in late November. And as we moved through December, I had to come down to town a half a dozen or more times to do all of those blood tests and radiation scans. I had to have my prostate sampled, blood sampled, meetings with a surgical urologist, meeting with the oncologist in radiation medicine. It was a very complex period of time, but within 4 to 5 weeks, everyone along this journey was nothing but kind and supportive and informative to me. And I couldn't believe how from the very top to the bottom of the system, I see a couple of our nurse navigators here. You folks were amazing. Every time I had any questions, you filled them in for me, and I just randomly sat down at a table at the back, and Elaine's sitting back there, and she was the head nurse in the radiation department I went to see. And she made me laugh. She made me accept what was to come. It was actually for something which had a lot of terror involved in the first steps. It flowed together. I knew I had to do it. I had to give up that sense of control I've ever had through my life. So by Christmas, 4 or 5 weeks after I was diagnosed, I was able to work my way through the system and to come out with a prognosis and come up with a treatment plan, which for me was androgen deprivation therapy and in external beam radiation therapy. And I chose an intensive one, a 3-week one. And along the way, there weren't, well, I'll come back to that in a second. So it was June or July, about 6 months after my treatment began, the radiation therapy. I went down to the University of Saskatchewan right in the middle of the COVID, and boy, that was an adventure. Everybody was masked up, and it was careful the way you came in and out of the buildings. And so for my very first radiation treatment, I thought, what can I do to brighten up the lives of the people down here in the clinic who work so hard every day to make us patients feel so good? So I stopped in the Hague Bakery, and I picked up a big box of beautiful sweet things, and I brought it in with me, and the lady at the front desk said, oh, you can't bring that in there. And I had it in my gym bag, a clean little gym bag. I said, oh, these are just gym clothes. She said, well, you can bring that in. And so, of course, you know, every day for the next 3 weeks, I'd stop off and pick up a package of sweet things to bring into the nurses there, and they'd be waiting like hounds at the side of the door. Pavlovian conditioning at its very, very best. And then one day there was a new lady on the front desk, and she confiscated my bag. And I got into the radiation therapy, and everyone, where are my donuts? So I told them they were safe, because I told the newcomer out front it was full of dirty laundry, so they didn't dare touch it. So that was basically my journey. And I continued with the androgen deprivation therapy for another 1.5 years, so 2 years in total. And every year I've had 1 to 2 checkups with my family physician. My PSAs are now not measurable. And I feel like that was a great success story. That's basically my cancer journey. So this word of ecology, oncology, urology, ecology, what does it all mean? I mentioned I'm a wildlife biologist, and ecology is simply a study of the way that things interact with one another. And it's a study of life. And the human body is its own ecosystem. You know, we've got cells with organelles in there that all interact together. And the cells build muscles and organs, and the organs feeds the body, and we have to have oxygen, we got to have food. It's all a complex ecosystem in our own little bodies. And I started to think about the system that treated me, and how from the very first moment when I was diagnosed, how people from every walk in the medical system, based on the information they'd learned from patients over the past decades of working with cancer patients and prostate cancers, how they put on their best show. They made me feel comfortable, they informed me, they comforted me, they guided me, they gave me the treatment which apparently I needed in order to improve my health. And so what do they have to do with each other? In an ecosystem, I've traveled all over the world with my studies. I've gone off to East Africa and seen the Serengeti and the Seychelles Islands to see tropical reefs in northern Canada and the grasslands. They're all hugely important to me as beautiful, functioning, interactive ecosystems. And what we do as biologists is we embrace diversity. And what we do as biologists is we look to find ways to interconnect individuals that are all over the place. And what we do as biologists is we always make sure that we take care of the stuff at the bottom, the green plants, the autotrophs. Everything else follows. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody involved in the treatment of this disease. It's a beautiful ecosystem. The patients are the very center of the existence for which they draw their livelihoods, for which they've made their commitments. The system works where nurses and agents at a desk making appointments for people, nurse navigators, nurses all over, the doctors, the urologists, the general physicians, they all work together to try and find a way to make this work easier. From the very first moment, I'm going to give a little pitch for St. Paul's Hospital here because I'd never been there before. And one of the first things I had to have done was to have my prostate sample. And that wasn't exactly a cakewalk, I got to tell you. I hear a couple of giggles around there. I've already given some advice into the system. But, you know, I walked in there and I walked down this hallway that many of you are probably familiar with. And I saw along that wallway a Christian notion of do unto others that which you'll do unto yourself. And it had on there every other major world religion I can think of and then some. It had on some cultural things that all say the same thing in different languages. And I thought, here was a group, here's a hospital that fundamentally believes in diversity. And they woven it into the welcoming world that you got there. And I knew I was in very good hands. So St. Paul's, thank you for your care in all of this. Patients lie at the bedrock. Without you here today with your support, without what people will learn from working with you, we wouldn't be able to advance this disease which affects men. For myself, it wasn't all a cakewalk. It wasn't all roses and flowers along the way. I've lost a great deal of my physicality and my sex drive. Many of you may experience that, some of you will not. But I'll tell you what, at a great old age of 70, 71, I've come to learn that love has many, many different ways it can manifest itself. And if it's not physical love, there's certainly many other ways that we can demonstrate that to family and friends and still feel like I'm a whole man. Curiously, one of the odd side effects I had was about 2 years after my treatment ended, I had a period of about 6 weeks of urinary incontinence. And I thought, oh boy, that's a disaster. I thought I was through this one. But the doctors held my hand and said, don't you worry. This is probably just a little sequelae and it'll go along. It'll go away if you're patient enough. And that's what ended up happening. So other than those two, I'm looking back on it now, relatively minor inconveniences, I walk through life every day still being optimistic. I take time to smell the roses. I go out and sit under the stars at night in pure darkness and watch those little stars glisten. Every once in a while, some big momentous moment like those northern lights we saw a couple weeks ago comes and gives me a thrill. Folks, we live in a beautiful world, and there are a lot of wonderful people around here, and I know there's probably a little bit of uncertainty, but for me, all I could do was have faith in the system, accept that I had this disease, and follow the bouncing ball. A couple of the small things I learned along the way, I do a lot of photography. This is one of my favorites. Tread softly. I am a softer, kinder individual now than I was a few years ago. I've learned that there's nothing as urgent as it used to be, that every moment today counts for something really, really special. And that's a couple of pictures of water striders on a surface of water, and they're just stretching the surface tension, the meniscus under their feet. And I think about that often when I walk into a situation where it's going to be a little tight or I'm going to be a little challenged to respond. And I say, go softly to myself. I'm grateful for the opportunity to still, five and a half years later, to be able to go out as I did last winter at 35 below and sit on the ground in front of a little bit of a push-up of ice and watch the sun go down at night and just marvel that things are moving as they should. Everything's got a purpose. It's a wonderful world. And I'm particularly grateful that I still get time to enjoy my family and friends. That's my favorite picture in the whole world. That's 4 years after my cancer journey began. And I'm paddling my family, my grandkids, my daughter-in-law, down a beautiful creek in the natural world that I love and have built my lifestyle around. And when I get in the canoe, when I go out in the evenings, I always say thanks. And I say thanks to the people in this room for helping me through this disease. And I hope all of you have a speedy and a successful journey as well. And I guess with that, I say thank you for the opportunity to come and have a word with you tonight.